Changes are coming to the SEC. Divisions are about to be out the window, but what if Tennessee wins the SEC East in 2023? What would that mean for the program heading into this new era of college football? That and a whole lot more. It's your Friday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And don't look now, everybody. It is Friday, and no better way to start your weekend than right here on Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm your host, Eric Kane. We got a fun one coming up today. Shout out everydayers. Thanks so much for being back in here each and every day. And today, what's on the docket is What If? Stealing this from our buddy over at Locked On Razorbacks, John Neighbors. What if Friday? What if Tennessee wins the SEC East this year? That'd be pretty cool going into this new venture in the SEC with no divisions. 10 most intriguing SEC players. A story over from On3. There is a Tennessee quarterback on that list. I'm sure you know who that is. And Chris Ledlum back in the transfer portal. That was newsworthy on Thursday morning. That is your show right here on Locked On Vols. So, what if? Again, in the cold open divisions, they're going away. 2024 season, still going to be an 8-game conference slate. But there's not going to be an SEC East. There's not going to be an SEC West. And moving forward, 2025 and beyond, hopefully, for my sake and for a lot of y'all's sakes and for the sake of the Southeastern Conference, put up or shut up, right? Hopefully it'll go to a 9-game conference schedule. And if that happens, is it going to be a 3-6 model? I don't know. Again, they have a short-term solution, as the news was announced, earlier this summer, that it's going to be an 8-game conference schedule. We know Tennessee's opponents for the 2024 schedule, and they've got the traditional Big Three and all that and more. But anyway, we still don't exactly know what the structure is going to look like 2025 and beyond. But what we do know is the 2023 season this fall is the last season of SEC East, SEC West. So if Tennessee were to win the SEC East, what would that mean for the program moving forward? I'll tell you. Well, first of all, the SEC championship game has been played in Atlanta since 1992, of course, at the Georgia Dome and now at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Tennessee has appeared in the championship game 5 times. It's won it twice, back in 1997 and 1998. It went back-to-back. It's lost 3 times, 2001 to LSU, 2004 to Auburn, and then 2007 to LSU. And if Tennessee were to win the SEC East this year, it would tie Auburn for 5th place in the SEC with 6 total championship game appearances. So that's the numerical data, right? I mean, that's really not important. But what's this mean for how Tennessee is viewed? What's this mean for Josh Heupel? I think it's an incredible thing for Tennessee if you were to win the SEC East this year. Obviously, if that's the case, you're back on track to where you were last year. 10 wins in the regular season, 11 wins overall. The caveat here, unless Georgia just stubs its toe 2 other times during the season, the caveat here, at least in the SEC slate, is you would beat Georgia in November. And again, moving forward to a 12-team conference or a 12-team playoff system, that would be huge. Again, you don't have to be representing your conference in the SEC championship game to make the 12-team playoff. We've seen examples in the past where you don't even have to represent your SEC, your conference in a 4-team playoff. We've seen that a couple of times, right? So, but it would mean that Tennessee's rolling. It would mean that this was not a one-off in 2022. It would mean that what Josh Heupel has built here at Tennessee is truly sustainable. And yes, a lot of those can be true if you don't make it to Atlanta this year. Again, we've talked about expectations. In my opinion, they should be double-digit wins. The expectation should be 10 wins. The caveat, though, is knowing everything that you lost, if you finish with 9 wins in the regular season, that ain't bad. That's a pretty daggone good season, in my opinion. If you finish with 8 wins, it's kind of like, well, I think that there's more out there. And the season can change. Your team can change based on injuries and productions and all that. The biggest caveat, and again, we'll talk about it in segment number 2, is the quarterback position in Joe Milton. So again, all of these things can be true even if you don't make it to Atlanta. But wouldn't that be cherry on the top? Last year of divisions in the Southeastern Conference, and you make it to Atlanta, you are You are taking advantage of an offseason from hell, essentially, for Georgia, to be completely frank with you, knowing that there's still so much talent on that roster, but they've got holes to fill. Winning that game in November could supplant the back-to-back national championship champions and say, hey, there's a new dog in the SEC. There's a new player in college football that shouldn't be taken lightly. So it can mean a whole lot of things. It'd be a whole lot of fun, to be honest with you. I mean, Tennessee has not appeared in an SEC championship game since 2007. Guys, in 2007, I think I was in 8th grade. Maybe I was a freshman in high school. I can't remember. It has been a minute. I can barely remember Tennessee playing in the SEC championship games, of course, with Peyton and T. Martin in 1997 and 1998. I mean, we're talking like I was 3-4 years old at that time, guys. I remember Tennessee playing in 04 and losing that game. I barely remember 01. I mean, it's been a minute. And guys, I'm 30 years old. I ain't young anymore, right? So I just think this would be huge. And it would show, again, it'd be further proof that Josh Heupel's system, the offense, you can have blind faith in, regardless of the quarterback. If there's a buy-in there and there's some talent there to work with, Josh Heupel and Joey Halzle can get that quarterback operating in the system that they need, thus scoring points. And it would also mean that Tennessee's defense is coming around. And it was something interesting that was mentioned on the VolQuest Mailbag podcast earlier this week. I don't know if you guys had any crossover there and listened to it, but somebody asked the question, does Tennessee have enough talent and depth to make a run at a national championship? And I highlighted Austin Price's response to that in the story because I thought it was interesting. Essentially, I can go look at it. Actually, I'm gonna go pull it up right now. Little live. This is not live radio right now, but on the fly, I'm going to pull it up. But I thought this was really interesting is how Austin answered this question. Again, the question is, does Tennessee have the talent and depth to make a national championship run? Here's what Austin said. We're sitting here 5 minutes ago discussing whether or not the Vols can get past Florida for the first time in 20 years in Gainesville. Again, that Week 3 matchup is huge. Now, we got them going to the playoffs, as he laughs. I think they do. I think if they are going to make a run at it, it's more so this year than next year. Brent Hubbs and I have discussed this, and I think Hubbs has put this on the board. The number of offensive and defensive linemen they could potentially lose after this year is pretty drastic on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So if you're going to make a run, it should probably be this year. The schedule sets up pretty nicely for you. You don't have any type of juggernaut in September. There are some tough games, no doubt. A&M is a toss-up game. I think Tennessee can beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, which is mind-boggling for me to say right now. You get to November, see what happens with Georgia. If you don't have a stumble game and are sitting there with 1 or 2 losses, you'll be in position for the playoffs. And I agree with that. You can't stub your toe. You can't stumble down the stretch or anything like that. Again, like a South Carolina game last night. I know that there's somebody that comments on YouTube all the time that says I'm obsessed with the South Carolina game, but I mean, guys, when you can't reference the 2022 season without referencing the South Carolina game. You can't reference the 2016 season where you beat Georgia and Florida without referencing the South Carolina and the Vanderbilt games. It's just you can't have it both ways, right? But I agree with all that. And if you're in position to do all of what Austin just said, obviously you're in position to go to the SEC championship game if you get that win against Georgia. So forward momentum, setting yourself up for basically a new team in 2024, but I think it'd be huge, cherry on top, conclude this era of Southeastern Conference football, Tennessee getting back to the SEC championship game for the 6th time since 1992, tying Auburn for 5th most in SEC, and it would just be further proof that what's happening here in Knoxville is here to stay, and ultimately that will affect recruiting as well. So what if Tennessee makes it to the SEC championship game? What if Tennessee wins the SEC East? It is not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. It's not, but things have to fall their way. They've got to get through some one tough stretch. They got to win a couple of toss-up games, and they got to get past Georgia in November. So just kind of a fun scenario to play around with, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'd love to hear your comments. Fill out the comment section on YouTube, and of course you can always hit me at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. So when we come back, 10 most intriguing players in the SEC. Joe Milton's on that list, and there's some other good ones on that list we'll discuss when Locked On Vols returns. But a proud sponsor of the show, new to the network, and we are so thrilled about it. So thrilled about it. It is eBay Motors, okay? For a championship team, it's all about making sure that every single player fits. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle as well. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, I encourage you to head on over to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or get this, your money is back. That's a pretty good guarantee, right? It's all about the eMotors guarantee. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, at the right prices on ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Check out the eBay Guaranteed Fit at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Guys, I want to thank you for being back here on Locked On Vols. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to the Locked On Vols YouTube channel, really encourage you to do that. It helps the show get in front of more Tennessee fans. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Really does some work. And hey, I don't know if you guys saw me post this on social media earlier this week, but Locked On Vols back in the top 100 podcasts for football in the United States. We are a top 100 podcast, and it's all thanks to you guys. So really appreciate all your guys' hard work and help me out there. All right, 10 most intriguing players in the SEC this year. Really like this topic because some of these players can make or break the season for their respective teams. It's a piece by Jesse Simonson, formerly of VolQuest, now of course at the parent company On3, and he comes out and he lists 10 players who were just most intriguing, in the SEC this year. And the first player that he highlights is Joe Milton at Tennessee, and I couldn't agree more. For Tennessee to get where they want to go, you've got to have good quarterback play, right? You've got to. The same could be said for pretty much any team. Now, Stetson Bennett's a little bit in 2021. He got better as the year went on, but you had a super team around you, right? Typically, not every football team is the Georgia Bulldogs. You got to have a guy in quarterback and sling it around. Do not turn it over and process information at a fast clip, especially in Josh Heupel's offense. So Joe Milton's the first player that he highlights. This is what Jesse has to say about Joe Milton. Quote, Joe Milton has spent the last 2 seasons honing his game and waiting for his opportunity to lead Tennessee's offense. The former Michigan transfer beat out Hendon Hooker for the starting job in 2021, but a minor injury and inconsistency relegated Milton to the bench. He was great in the backup role in 2022, 10 touchdowns, no picks, led the Vols to an Orange Bowl win over Clemson, and now it's his show. Milton has perhaps the best pure arm talent in America. He could be this year's Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, garnering top 5 buzz thanks to some freakish plays. He also could get benched again if accuracy issues return, as 5-star quarterback freshman Nico Iamaleava is the heir apparent of the Tennessee offense. All that is true. This is Joe Milton's team. He's been waiting. He's been a great teammate. He's been a great resource for Hendon Hooker each of the past 2 seasons. Shined in mop-up duty, shined when his time came to start the last couple of games of the year in 2022, and he performed well. Tools, intangibles, everything you want in a quarterback. It really kind of makes you drool if you're a football guy, right? But can he do it consistently? Can he do it week after week? You guys have heard me say this a million times over the summer. We will find out. But I couldn't agree more. Joe Milton, without a doubt, is one of the most intriguing players in the SEC for 2023. Now, I'm going to go down this list here that Jesse highlights. And because, again, the quarterback position is so important, he lists 5 quarterbacks. So half these guys listed on this list of the 10 most intriguing players are, the quarterback position. 5 quarterbacks, 2 wide receivers, 2 defensive linemen, and 1 running back. We'll stay with the quarterbacks here. So we talked about Joe Milton. Carson Beck is up next for the Georgia Bulldogs. And, of course, this is an easy one, right? Georgia has had Stetson Bennett, Great story, yada, yada, yada. Great team around him, all that, back-to-back national championship. And Carson Beck is probably a better athlete and probably a better quarterback in terms of arm strength and all that. And he was not, he was not able to play. He's just kind of been sitting around and waiting his turn. So, what's he going to look like? He's never started a game, but something Jesse highlights here that I really, really agree with. I think this is pretty interesting. What if, kind of doing the what ifs in segment 1, what if Carson Beck, supported by the best offensive line in the country and a very deep group of playmakers, again, he's got toys to play with, what if Carson Beck leads Georgia back to the college football playoff, is a Heisman Trophy candidate, and becomes a day 1 to 2 NFL draft pick? In the new age of transfers, Carson Beck could become the poster child for why staying at a program is an avenue for some. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. I hope that doesn't happen, obviously. But wouldn't that be neat to have a poster child who sits, waits his turn, and then goes up there and balls out? I mean, hell, Stetson Bennett kind of did that as well, but Carson Beck is to another degree. But I think everybody's intrigued to see, who is Carson Beck? What does he look like week after week? And will he get Georgia back to where they want to go? It'll be interesting. Another quarterback that he highlights here is Will Rogers. I've said it a couple of times, and he even points it out, this being Jesse Simonson in the story here. Feels like Will Rogers has been there for a decade. I like to say it feels like Will Rogers has been the quarterback at Mississippi State since the Reagan administration. It's been a long time, right? But now the offense is slightly different without Mike Leach. May he rest in peace. It's going to be more of an open concept and stuff like that, and more of a hybrid scheme this fall. But he, of course, still led the SEC in passing last year. He's got good feet. He's got good arm strength, and he's so overlooked. Nobody ever talks about Will Rogers in terms of passers in the SEC. They just don't. I don't understand why. That's why I think he's going to be a preseason all SEC pick, like we talked about earlier this week. But Will Rogers is one there, but without Mike Leach, what does he look like? Another quarterback that's highlighted in this is Devin Leary, excuse me. Devin Leary was one of the best quarterbacks in the country in 2021. He tore a pectoral last year, missed a little bit, but he was nowhere near the quarterback that he was in minimal time last year. But in 2021, he had 35 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. How is he going to jive with Liam Cohen, who is back as the offensive coordinator at Kentucky? And they've got some great receivers. Whether you want to believe it or not, Barian Brown, Dane Key, they've got some really good receivers up there in Lexington. They do. But they are dependent on the transfer portal so much this year, especially the line of scrimmage. But Devin Leary is a quarterback to highlight because that makes a whole lot of sense. And the last quarterback to highlight here from Jesse Simonton, as we look at the top 10 most intriguing players in the SEC for 2023, is Spencer Rattler. Kind of an up and down season, first year over there in South Carolina after being essentially winning the Heisman Trophy before the 2021 season even began, right? And then he was benched and everything. He says that he was kind of up and down. Then he was John Elway the last couple of weeks when he beat Tennessee, beat Clemson, played Notre Dame, of course, in the bowl game. He looked really, really good. But again, he gets a new offensive coordinator now for the third time in 3 years. How is he going to respond? He does have Juice Wells, who's arguably one of the best wide receivers returning in the SEC. So Spencer Rattler, I think, is really interesting. If not for those 2 games against Tennessee and Clemson, his touchdown to interception ratio would have been like 13-11, 14-11. It wouldn't have looked great at season's end. But he pretty much hit every pass that he threw against Tennessee and looked good against Clemson as well. Those are the 5 quarterbacks. Quickly, a couple of receivers that he highlights. Luther Brown. What does he look like in Missouri without Dominic Lovett? That's really intriguing. Of course, Lovett now over at Georgia. And Luther Brown, former 5-star prospect, homegrown. He's a Missouri-made guy, and now he's stepping up. And, can he expand upon a freshman season where he caught 45 passes and step up and be the playmaker that Missouri needs to be? When you talk about playmakers in the Missouri offense, the list starts with Luther Brown and it ends at Luther Brown. There's not a whole lot else there, to be completely honest. So Luther Brown makes a whole lot of sense. Another wide receiver that is on this list is Malik Benson. You might remember that name from following Tennessee recruiting. He coming from the JUCO ranks as Alabama's trying to shore up the wide receiver position because it was not that great in 2020 and 2022 compared to what it's been each of the last 4 seasons with Devonta Smith and Ruggs and all these guys. I mean, it's been wide receiver you for so long, but they're trying to beef up that wide receiver group, and I think Malik Benson can be a playmaker for Alabama, and he's intriguing because, again, a lot of questions around Alabama this year, especially at the quarterback position. Those are the 2 wide receivers. Couple defensive linemen he highlights. Mason Smith of LSU had 4 sacks as a freshman, tore his ACL in the opener last year. His stature, he looks like an NFL guy. He's one to pay attention to. Another defensive lineman would be Cam Jackson. Big old frame right there in the interior of the defensive line. 6'6", 355 pounds. Can he help shore up Florida's rush defense? That's a question that Jesse asked. And then finally, a running back on the list is Jarquez Hunter from Auburn. And of course, when you have a new head coach, breaking in likely a new quarterback, you want to rely on the run game. So if Auburn's going to go anywhere, they need a good season from Jarquez Hunter, who's going to take over for Tank Bigsby. Of course, he was the backup last year. Those are the list of the 10 most intriguing SEC players entering the season from On3's Jesse Simonton. Anybody else that you'd like to throw in there, maybe even from Tennessee? I think in terms of Tennessee, the representation, it's got to be Joe Milton. It's got to be Joe Milton. But there's also some other guys. Harold Perkins of LSU is a freaking stud. Jackson Dart could potentially be on this. Michael Trigg as well as Ole Miss. There's a lot of other players that could be on this list, but I think this is a pretty good list. And these are the quarterbacks that have a lot of questions to answer. And of course, in my opinion, it starts with Joe Milton of Tennessee. So, 10 most intriguing SEC players entering the season. Who's number 1 for you? I would say Joe Milton is for me, and it probably is for you as well. When we come back, Tennessee experienced a player darting to the transfer portal, and it was a guy that just got here in May. More on Chris Ledlum leaving the University of Tennessee as we wrap up a Locked On Vols here in just a second. All right, guys, we are going to wrap up this week's worth of Locked On Vols here. It's going to be a shorter segment here in segment 3, because I went a little overboard in segments 1 and 2. But Chris Ledlum, he was going to be good for Tennessee this year, in my opinion. Someone that the coaching staff was really excited about, someone that could add stability to the front line. He went into the transfer portal, re-entered the transfer portal Thursday morning, and this is something that's really caught the coaching staff at least by surprise, thinking the talk is that he maybe wants to be closer to home, but this is not something I believe the coaching staff was really aware of at the beginning of this week. The media was able, I didn't go, but the media was able to go over. There was a media availability, or I think it was Tuesday, at Pratt Pavilion for Tennessee basketball, and he wasn't practicing. There was an open portion of practice. He wasn't practicing as the medical staff, I believe, was citing some type of injury to where he was going to be held out of the exhibitions in Italy. But Rick Barnes is asked about Chris Ledlum and essentially what he's going to bring to the table, and he said, yeah, he's gonna add a lot. Doesn't sound like a guy that was aware that Chris Ledlum was wanting to leave the program, which is not all great. But again, he didn't participate in Tuesday's open workout at in practice. Tennessee spokesman at the time said that he was disclosing an injury, but he was not anticipating playing in the exhibition games in Italy earlier next month. He averaged 18.5 points, 8.5 rebounds in 28 games last season for Harvard. He was there for 4 years, played 3 seasons. Remember the COVID year, the Ivy League didn't play basketball that season, but he came over early during the process through the transfer portal and, was thought to be a huge addition for Tennessee. Huge addition for Tennessee. Barnes was asked about Chris Lovelum and Jordan Gainey, 2 of the transfers coming in during that media availability on Tuesday, and this is what he said. Both of them understand how to play. Both of them have the ability to create their own shots. They both understand the game. They both, again, highly competitive, and have added to us. Both of them are still learning the system, but they've added a lot. That was just Tuesday. So in terms of what they've shown us from their work ethic, their attitude, their willingness to come in right in here and blend in with our team and our program has been great. Both of those guys are going to add a lot for us. And then 2 days later, Chris Ledlum enters the transfer portal. So, is it you wanting to be closer to home? He's from Brooklyn, New York. Maybe that's a thing, and I don't want to undervalue that. But let's look at what's happened this summer. Since Chris Ledlum, who I think would have been great for Tennessee this year and added a whole lot of stability to the front line, and I'm no basketball expert, but that's just kind of what I see and what I believe. But since Chris Ledlum committed to Tennessee in the transfer portal, You had Josiah Jordan-James coming back as a walk-on, adding to it, right? And you also had Toby Awaka, who absolutely balled out in the FIBA World Cup at the 19 and under for Team USA this summer. And again, I'm not saying those are the reasons why maybe Ledlum jumped ship, but there's reason to believe that both of those guys would command more work at the 4 potentially. And the 4 is where Chris Lovelum, was going to be playing essentially. I'm not saying that's the reason he left, but potentially that could have been a contributing factor. So what's this mean? This move, how does it impact Tennessee the most moving forward? As I noticed that I have the wrong background here on YouTube. There we go. I think this impacts Jonas Adu, I think this impacts Toby Awaka, and I think this impacts Josiah Jordan-James the most. Tennessee loves playing small ball. Tennessee will go a small lineup with Josiah Jordan-James playing the 4 a lot. Olivier Comeau would play the 5, and Tennessee would roll that a whole lot last year. And really, Josiah's played that 4 position a lot each of the last couple of seasons because he has defensive flexibility. There's lineup versatility in there with Josiah Jordan-James. So I think Tennessee could go smaller a lot now with that as well. But also Toby Awaka, who is, I say only 6'8". He's only 6'8", but he's shorter than the likes of Jonas Adu. He's shorter than the likes of JP Australia and some of these other guys. He could command a little bit more of the work at the 4. So I think those guys' role, of course, Josiah Jordan-James is going to have a huge role in this team, but I think Toby Awaka's role and Josiah Jordan-James' role with the 4 could grow a little bit more. I think you'll see JP Australia, his role continue to grow a little bit more as well. 6'11", 233, can play the 4 or the 5. He'll be a true freshman, obviously, so his role could grow a little bit. In talking with some people, still believe that Cade Phillips is going to be an incoming freshman. Still likely to be a redshirt this year, most likely. But the way that Toby Awaka played this summer, and of course you know what Josiah Jordan-James can do, I think Tennessee's going to be okay. However, it takes a hit, depth-wise. And, Chris Ledlum's a guy that's played an awful lot of basketball. He has done a lot of things for Harvard, and he's an experienced guy. He started 27 times in 28 games as a junior, averaging 31.5 minutes per game, scored in double figures 26 times that season with 9 double-doubles, had a season-high 35 points, had 13 rebounds in a Cornell victory in February. In over 70 games the last 3 seasons, Ledlum averaged 13.6 points per game, 4.6 rebounds per game, nearly 2 steals, almost 2 assists, and averaging about 25 minutes per game, making 41 starts. So, again, is this the end of the world? No, it's not. Is it a little bizarre? Yeah, because you commit in May, you get here in June, you go through some work, right before you're about to leave and go to your exhibition play in Italy. It's like, oh, hold on a minute. I think I'm going to go in the transfer portal again. Very rarely do you see a player enter and then re-enter the transfer portal in the same cycle, but that's the case. So I think Tennessee's going to be okay, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that this was kind of a bummer because I was looking forward to watching Chris Ledlum play some basketball for Tennessee. So bigger roles for Toby Awaka and Josiah Jordan-James at the 4 position. Maybe JP Australia as well. Maybe his minutes will grow a little bit more as a true freshman. But overall, I think Tennessee is going to be just okay. All right, that's going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols. Can't thank you enough for coming back. Shout out everydayers. Appreciate you guys. And if you're not an everydayer, come back Monday and find out how you can become an everydayer right here at Locked On Vols, where you make it your first listen each and every day. Subscribe, support the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts. Rate 5 stars, leave a positive review. Guys, thank you so much. Couldn't do it without you. Stay safe and have a great weekend, everybody. This is Locked On Vols.